Hello, come.
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, in the previous class we have discussed disaster communication. All the students, please put your attendance in the command window. All the students, please put your attendance in the command window. As we have already taken the class regarding disaster communication, now we will discuss what are the barriers of the disaster situation or communication. Also, crisis counseling. Why a crisis counseling is mandatory during a disaster is to be studied in this presentation. First of all, you must know what is a barrier. Whenever we are communicating to each other, if I am taking a class to you, there will be a barrier if my language is unknown to you. That is, if I am speaking in English, you are not able to understand English, then there will be a barrier. Definitely, that is a language barrier. Similarly, there will be a slang barrier because I am from another side of Kerala means there will be a change in voice, what's a slang. So definitely there will be a barrier. And another thing is the person who is taking the class or listening are not in a situation to understand or give 100% efficiency in the communication. There will also be a barrier. Then there is a chance of miscommunication. What I am telling will be misunderstood by you. There is also a barrier. Similarly, here I will discuss the barriers which are in disaster communication. There are different type of barriers in a disaster situation, and communication problems are pervasive in many disaster situations. Nearly all the case studies of disasters occurring in the last 30 years describe communication problem, communication problem of sort. So we are going to explain the various of two issues, general issues. First one is external communication with the public, and second one is internal communication along emergency response personnel and their agencies. So when we are considering disaster communication, very important communication barrier is the second one. That is internal communication among the emergency response personnel and their agencies. If this barrier is not overcome, definitely The affected community who is affected by the disaster will be suffered due to this barrier. That is miscommunication between emergency response personnel. In your situation means there is a flood in your nearby area and someone who is came there for securing that flood affected people. If the communication is not good, definitely that will affect the response effectiveness. That is disaster response effectiveness. When a person require an emergency, he won't get even in a worse condition if the communication is not proper. So we will discuss the second point firstly because that is the important point or that's the important thing which should be we should focus. So first one is technical problem. Is there any technical problem? Definitely, whenever we communicate to each other, the first problem will be technical problem. Even if I am taking this class, in the beginning, I have a technical issue that is internet unavailability means that's a technical issue. This will affect our classes and even if my voice are breaking, that will disturb you to listen to the class. So every word, whenever communication comes, the first barrier is technical problems. Despite massive technological change in recent years, communication problem persists, including system failure, system overload, and incompatibility between communication systems used by different agencies. These are the three important technical problems. First one is system failure. Even we are focusing on a good system. If there is a failure of the system, that means even our hardware is supported by electricity. If there is a problem of lack of electricity, definitely that will affect our system. Complete system will be failed. And second one is system overloading. That is in internet, we can know that or cell phone industries, we can understand that systems are in every hands. Everyone are using the disaster communication equipments. If we are not using it in a proper way, definitely the system get overloaded. If I myself, you, everyone using the system at the same time, the system cannot hold all the communication activities. In a crisis or in a disaster situation, definitely everyone will try to contact the agencies or supporting person, uh, securing person who is NGOs, police, military, anyone. They will try to contact them continuously to get assist from them. But in such situation, if the system is continuously using by plenty of people in a local area, the system will get overloaded. That's an important technical issue, or it is an important barrier of communication. And second one, last one is incompatibility of communication system used by different agencies. When we are discussing, we know that even computers, someone will use Windows, someone will use Linux, someone will use another software, system software. There will be a difference between the difference between systems. So definitely, in a similar way, if we are taking a technical problem or communication, if someone speak in a formal language that's in English and local person is unable to understand that language, definitely there will be a barrier and the affected community cannot act as the guidance given by the agencies. And even agencies having different protocols, different communication medium. If that communication medium is mismatching, definitely our situation will get worse. Okay, hope you are understanding what is the technical problems or barriers due to system failure, due to system overloading and incompatibility between communication system and system used by different agencies. Okay. Next, we will go for some specific technical problem identified in recent case studies. These are the examples where failure of technical equipment, that is system, caused barrier for communication. First one is failure of wired telephone system due to explosion. The experienced police, firefighters, and military in the Toulouse ammonium nitrate disaster to September 2001. If you are considering a case study, there was an explosion on the telephone system, and this telephone system entirely collapsed, and there will not be any communication between police and military, firefighters, etc. So the recovery or rehabilitation of the process get worse condition. Okay, hope you are understanding what is that failure. And second one is overload of telephone system due to insufficient line. There is a chance of that. Even in our college, when everyone taking online classes, definitely our system get overloaded. We have good internet facility in our college, even though if every faculty member in our college are taking classes at the same time, there will be a chance of failure. This will disturb the communication between faculty as well as student. Same will happen in the case of disaster communication. Okay, when a disaster experienced during the wave-bound leaking container ship incident, Norfolk, May 1991, there was an overloading in the telephone system which caused the disaster recovery difficult. So this is an important problem. And saturation of mobile phone network. This has happened in Toulouse in 2001, which is I already explained the failure of wired telephone system. There was a failure of wired system, so definitely people who engaged with that disaster recovery, they have tried through mobile phones. Since that's the beginning of mobile phones, the system get overloaded, and that also made barrier for the recovery of disaster. Also, that communication gap taken away some lives as well as damaged some properties. The vulnerabilities are very increased due to this saturation of mobile phone network. And another one is out of range radio communication experienced by police during the Nipro Limited chemical factory explosion, Flicksburg in 1974. During that period, walkie-talkies are used by the police, and while communicating, there may be out-of-range radio communication effects. That is, the walkie-talkie through walkie-talkies, police cannot communicate each other. Through satellite phones, they cannot communicate each other due to some failure in the system. That's an example of technical problem. Then incompatible radio systems such as lack of common communication frequency experienced by fire, police, coast guard during the wave-borne leaking container ship incident. As we know that for the safety purpose, police, military, and other fire rescue team and firefighters are using their own frequency for communicating each other, and they are also using code words for the communication. But in 1991, when Weyburn leaking container ship incident happened, I have already mentioned that our lot of telephone system due to insufficient line happened in the same area. Similarly, there was a change in frequency of communication channels of fire, police, and coast guard. Due to that, they cannot communicate each other, which made a failure of the system or made a barrier for the communication. And most problems are complex mix of technological and human factors. We cannot say every barrier are the answers of technological issues. However, most communication problems are created from a complex mix of technology as well as human factor. As we know that whenever we are using a communication medium, even now I am using a communication medium to talk with you, that is Google Meet. Through Google Meet, I am taking class to you, and if I am not aware about the system, definitely I cannot communicate you. And while doing this one, there is a chance of muting my mic by mistake may also cause problem for communication. These are important problems faced due to human and technological mix. And for an example, maintaining adequate communication system can be more difficult if reliant on voluntary work by technicians and engineers. This is an example of a mixed technological and human factor barrier. And we need improved training in communication system for emergency personnel can make for more efficient system use. Then only we can overcome the barrier. Else, when our system is unknown to human being, I mean, some people who build that program may unknown to them, but the common people who is engaging with communication may not aware about the system may create barrier between technology and human. So we need to give improved training in that area. Communication hubs such as control centers and casualty center can become overwhelmed by the number of incoming communications, insufficiency of communication channel, and insufficiency of staff training and preparedness. As we have already mentioned, there are technical problems, human problems. Comparing all this insufficiency may cause barrier for the disaster communication. This increases stress and extreme cases could lead to organizational failure. When we are unable to communicate each other, definitely I will get tensed. If I am using a medium and the connections are not well, I will be go through tough situation, how I will engage the student, how I can communicate to the student, how I can deliver my lectures. So that tension will be happening to me. But even after that, I can communicate little bit to you. But when the system continuously going in same manner, our organizational system completely fail. That's the most complex barrier of human and technological mix. Okay, disaster situation present conditions specific to disaster situation in general as well as future. Whenever we are considering present situation, there will be a unique to specific unit disaster. We cannot use a communication medium in the earthquake situation. Same medium cannot be used in a flood area. Same system cannot be used in a another area. So we must know what is the condition of disaster. Is it a natural disaster or an artificial disaster? If that is a natural disaster, what kind of natural disaster happening? Is it a earthquake or a flood? If in a flood area we can communicate through telephone channels, there will not be any problem of telephone lines which is passing over the sky or buildings. But in case of earthquakes, there is a chance of collapse of that technical channel or telecommunication channel. So we must be very aware about this condition. For an example, high information uncertainty and limited information control are features of disaster situation in general, which create challenges for crisis communication. This is an important thing. This will create a challenge for crisis communication. Communication dynamics within the team across the organizational level and between different agencies under the disaster conditions all need to better understood. Every communication style, every communication medium, the time, how everything should be answered when we are working as a team. If there is no communication, proper communication between each other, definitely that will lead to miscommunication, which will affect the whole system for a long time. Communication technologies used in disaster management each have different features and properties that in turn affect the communication dynamics. Every technology, we have different technology for communications. As we already mentioned, that there is social media, there will be mobile apps, there will be walkie-talkies, then there will be another different type of methods. We have already mentioned all these things in the last class. And if that class of equipments are not familiar with everyone in the field, that will make problem between the communication or barrier between the communication. Every channel having their own style. I mean, if the case of social media is taking Facebook service or Facebook safety signals, they are provided in a typing manner in the social media Facebook. But when it comes telephone lines, it is entirely different feature. We have to communicate with another person through phone by a proper way. This is the important thing. All these barriers should be overcome. This is a simple figure how the disaster will be controlled or met with communication devices. In the figure, we can see that it is starting from preparedness. Sorry for the interruption. Our work is starting from the planning. We know that planning is the first stage. From planning onwards, planning onwards, we will start our communication. During planning, the pupil who is engaged in with this disaster mitigation process will interact through internet, mobile phones, satellite phones, and even paper communication. If we are using papers, medias are different kinds. E-papers are there, hard copies are there. By all these kind of things, we are communicating with each other. After planning well, this plan should be given or alert to be informed to the affecting area, that is community or individual who is going to be affected by the disaster should be informed well. And after that, during a mitigation process, in some cases we can avoid that disaster, but some cases we cannot avoid the disaster, but we can reduce the disaster. In mitigation, we have to communication well, and we have to give alerts to the individuals as well as community in a proper way. During the last flood in Kerala, dams are fully uh, completely filled, and we have given, our government has given alerts to the people nearby by orange alert, yellow alert, and red alert. These are an examples of communication between people and the government. That's a mitigation process. After mitigation, we will go for preparedness. We will ready to face the disaster which is going to be happen here. So we will be ready with all our service. I have already told that we need to prepare at least self kit for 72 hours, 3 days for the safe and secure escape from disaster. Such a way we are going to face the disaster. After disaster, we need to recover. For recovery includes rehabilitation and reconstruction. This process will be repeated because after recovery, we need to plan to avoid disaster in the future case. This is the process of communication, or this is the presence of communication in a disaster risk reduction. And we can conclude what are the barriers of disaster communication. These are the 5 or 6 points we need to focus on. Non-focus on the issue at hand and not being attentive. That's the important barrier. We have an issue. There is a chance of disaster. Even after understanding that thing, we are not being attentive. Definitely, the system will be failure. That miscommunication leads to loss of a lot of lives as well as damage or vulnerability of properties. Then second one is avoid interruption, show interest in what being said. Every time, whenever a person or a government gives a warning or a message through public media to a person or a community, they should be vigilant and they should take care of that thing. If we are not giving much interest to that news, may cause multiple damages in different area in the local community. And avoid being judgmental but make provision for feedback. Whenever a disaster comes, the people in the local area already judgment that this disaster is common here and the effect will be like this and we won't affect much and the people surrounded to us is very panic and they are telling like this is going to be a big issue. They are judgmental. If a person who is judgmental and not giving much importance to the disaster communication will create problem for himself as well as the adjacent community. So this is an important problem. Be prepared and give feedback to the agency who is supporting during disaster. Then only we can provide proper safety nets for all. The next one is pay attention to all non-verbal communication. Sometimes pupils are not in a good mood, having some crisis in their mind. They have lost their family member. They will be in very big situation. In some cases, if a heart failure or something happened to a patient, he will not be able to communicate the same to the agency. So the agency member or nearby individual should be always vigilant, always pay attention to non-verbal communication from nearby. Then be conscious of individual differences. There will be a difference between communication of one person and another. Take an example here. If I am telling some names in this classroom, Rahul or Vishnu, the style of communication between them are entirely different. They may be from other side and someone from other side, and their vision also will be very changed. Someone will be focusing on a particular area, particular problem deeply, and other will take carelessly that problem. That depends on the individuality. And keep stress in check but be assertive. In every time, we should be very tense. Actually, we have to give stress. We have to load the person who is in the agency. Then only they will work hard. Else, they will be taking relaxed and that will affect our disaster risk reduction activity. So these are the barriers. This is the conclusion of barriers. So be ready. And how to get effective disaster communication. This is the another thing we have to focus on. This is an depends on complex factor, including trust between communicator and audience involvement, emotional response. Everything depends on this disaster communication. For an effective disaster communication, trust in institution and organization should be considered in developing disaster communication messages. These are the important thing for effective disaster communication. Now we will discuss some specific principles related to effective risk communication. Firstly, An understanding of the characteristics of an audience is essential to develop effective risk communication efforts. First of all, we must understand what is happening there, how the pupil affected is responding. Sometimes they won't listen to the person who is giving instruction. So the person who is giving instruction should be adjust his version to give more idea to them. So sometimes the person should change his language, change his attitude, change his style in a manner which should be understandable for the affected community or people. And the how, when, and by whom a message is delivered impacts its effectiveness. Whenever we are communicating to another person or another community, we should be say how we will communicate, when we should communicate, and by whom. Sometimes we cannot communicate directly, by whom we should communicate to other person. These messages impact the effectiveness. If in a community where a pupil who is not interested to communicate to the public media, we should hire a person who is representing them, and we have to communicate that. In a company, if there is a strike, the pure government or management cannot directly communicate to all the person. Definitely that meeting will be a failure. But instead, we have to choose one representative, one or two or three or four representative from that community, and we have to talk with them. Then only we will get the solution. In your college, you can see the same. For that, we are conducting course committee meetings and class committee meetings as per K2 regulations. This is an example of the same. And communicator must continuously adapt changing situations. I have already told whatever happening, the communicator has to adjust his style and word and language according to the situation, and using preparedness approach like games, interactive discussion groups, or teaching make a proposal of how you can effectively increase language or preparedness behavior of a target group on a disaster management. You can adopt any kind of technologies that include games, interactive discussion groups, or teaching, which will give increased knowledge to the targeted group in a disaster condition. This is an important thing required for effective communication. And promotion of discussion group approach to general disaster preparedness is more effective than simple provision of written information. If we are providing a manual that we should follow in a disaster condition, the people who is affected by that, they cannot read all the manual data and escape from that. In such situation, we have to provide discussion groups. The pupil must be engaged with discussion and get suggestion from each one of them. And after brainstorming, we can choose one or two suggestions and escape from the situation. This is an example. And now we will go to crisis counseling. This is a very important thing. Whenever a disaster happens, please listen to it importantly, because there's a chance of 10 marks in K2 examination, which is a small topic, crisis counseling. When doing a, we are in a disaster situation, the pupil may go emotionally. Sometimes the relatives, including father, mother, wife, and very intimates, may go their life during a disaster, may cause crisis in the mind of person. A crisis is defined as a situation or event in which a person feels overwhelmed or has difficulty coping, or crisis might be caused by any event such as death of family member, the loss of job, or ending of a relationship. This is an important thing. We are counselors in our nearby area, in our towns and cities, for escaping the pupil who is suffering from crisis. Some people may lose their family member may affected, or losing a job may cause psychological issues. and another one is ending up a relationship. Someone in this group already faced any of these things in your life, experienced the same, and overcome from them. And during such situation, people experience a wide range of feelings, and each person's response to a crisis is different. That's important thing. It is normal to feel frightened, anxious, and depressed at a such time. We have to counsel them well to take them out of that situation for a proper communication. Sorry, the heading is different. Actually, that the heading is not required. Crisis counseling involves providing supports and guidance to an individual. Actually, I will delete that thing. Just 1 minute. Crisis counseling involves providing support and guidance to an individual or a group of people, such as family or community, during a crisis. This is an important thing. And the purpose of counseling is to decrease emotional pain, provide emotional support, and make sure that people in the crisis is safe, and help develop a plan for coping with the situation. Then only the people affected or crisis situation can overcome from their situation and get good condition in the future. Else, the person who is depressed condition may go on depressing stage till his death. So we should be very vigilant. We should give much importance for crisis counseling. There are 6 intervention strategies having 6 basic steps. Everything should be studied in this class. So the time is already over. So I am not giving much, I'm not taking much time of you. So please listen in the next class. I will share this slide also. Thank you for listening. If anyone pending to mark their attendance, please share your attendance. If anyone pending to give their attendance, please share your attendance. I know some students are in this classroom are not attending well. So I will take the attendance from the command window as well as the report generated automatically from the Google Meet. Thank you for listening.